there was a point where I was building Forager towards like the end where I had a conversation with my dad actually and said, we're struggling with the business and we're going through this M&A process, but like, I think our tech is good and I just don't necessarily want to keep running a freight brokerage. And he said, well, you have an identity crisis. You can either be a freight brokerage or a tech company, but you can't be both.
Did you know that 91% of phishing attacks are conducted via email? Freight brokers are particularly at risk as email is the primary, really only option to collect carrier invoices, until now. ePay Manager powered by OTR Solutions is a back office automation and carrier payments platform that revolutionizes brokerage back offices with their proactive invoicing workflow, a centralized portal that gets you out of your email. The key to ePay's invoicing workflow is that the invoice is proactively triggered by the broker's TMS and is only created once the carrier reviews the details, which catches invoice disputes early on. This means that you can increase your invoice processing by up to 300 to 500% and reduce billing inaccuracies by 99%. Learn more about ePay by visiting epaymanager.com or text ePayFC to 80483 to see what they can do for your brokerage. We've partnered with Ascend TMS, the world's most popular and top-rated transportation management system. It's the ultimate tool for all your freight needs. You can use our referral code RA-FreightCaviar to receive 3 months of Ascend TMS for free. It only takes 20 seconds to sign up and no credit card is required. You can click the link below to learn more. Today's podcast is also brought to you by TextLocate. TextLocate makes it easy for brokers to communicate directly with drivers via SMS-based text messaging, no app to download without having to use personal communication devices. Features like two-way text chat, one-time location updates, and image capture, think BOLs and PODs, all inside a simple dashboard, give brokers the quick updates they need to make better decisions about freight. Instead of wasting time calling drivers, brokers simply automate the process through TextLocate and save hours at very little cost investment. Go to textlocate.com to learn more.
What's going on?
Yo.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Hey, guys, we need to decide to bring the energy up. You know what I mean?
We do.
Because Christian, to your point, I feel it as well. I feel the gloom. I feel the doom.
There's something over here. I don't know. Maybe it's the storm coming.
But we gotta get jacked up here because we got Matt Silver joining us.
That's right. Yeah, we need some more energy in here.
Morning, guys.
Matt, what is going on?
It is gloomy here in Chicago.
Yeah, it's been a big week for you, though.
Yeah,
so not gloomy over your head.
No, a lot of it.
Yeah, tell us a little bit, Matt, like about your journey. I know, like, you launched Cargado officially on Monday. You've been kind of like in stealth. No one was really sure what you were doing, stuff like that. So it's a big week. You were on your brother's podcast, the Freight Pod. I guess tell us, I want to hear all the details about like Cargado, why you chose to launch this week, like why you waited, and spill the beans on everything.
Spill the beans on everything. All right. So we can rewind back to when, back in October, when Rylan and I first met, and Rylan's my co-founder and our CTO. Right around the same time, Convoy collapsed, and Rylan and I had started talking about building this out. And when Convoy died, I immediately flew out to Seattle to try to finalize things with Rylan and also convince engineers to join us. And so we met with probably 8 or 9 engineers, and everybody was basically willing to follow Rylan wherever he went. We decided to start with 3 of those engineers. They all joined us right out of the gate, right when we started. And then
what was his role at Convoy?
Rylan oversaw Convoy Go and Convoy for Brokers. So Convoy Go is their drop dealer program. Convoy for Brokers was their version of like an integrated load board, which Flexport now owns.
Mm-hmm.
So we started. So the team got together, spent 2 weeks working together, sitting on Zoom, basically talking about all the technical decisions they wanted to make that were different than what they had seen at Convoy. and the right things to like think through before you start actually building out a platform. And so that included thinking about making sure that we could do it in multiple languages. So it's already in Spanish, making sure it can be done in multiple currencies to be able to eventually support pesos. And so we started with that, spent a couple weeks doing that. Rylan also built out all the designs in Figma initially and essentially built out a prototype. We showed that to 50 different carriers and brokers, went to Laredo, met with a bunch of them, got a ton of feedback. A lot of the designs evolved from the first time we met with them to what we launched. And then in February, we launched the carrier side of the marketplace and started enabling trucking companies to go in and fill out their profiles, tell us how many trucks, trailers, and drivers they've got, the types of trailers that they've got. They can also put in the lanes that they're looking to haul, so they can say where they'll pick up in Mexico, where they'll cross, where they'll deliver in the United States, and vice versa. And they can fill out a few other things about their company that would help kind of improve the experience for them. And so we started to build out the carrier side of the marketplace in February. And then we continued to build out the product for the load board itself, for the broker experience. And April 1st, we launched with a handful of brokers, including Nolan Transportation and Direct Connect Logistics, and then continued to add more brokers as we started to grow. And it just took off from there. And so right when a broker posts today, and like this was pretty much available right out of the gate, when a broker posts a load, the trucking company gets notified immediately that there's a new posting that they can go bid on. So that's how we kind of jump started the entire thing and enabled people to start doing business together.
Matt, who tests the language in Spanish, the version of Cargado in Spanish?
Matt's fluent now, I heard.
Initially, I'm not fluent. I can definitely read I can understand, what's going on in emails and whatnot, but we have Hector in Laredo.
Okay.
He initially was doing the translations, and then we brought on somebody that actually worked at Forger also, that was doing the translations for us in Mexico.
Have you guys found any easy mechanisms to kind of leverage any of this AI stuff to help with any of that, like just kind of in real time, or does every single piece of the app needs to get translated?
There's going to be other things that'll need real-time translation, because this is all stuff that's like static. So, you have to translate load one time. And it's all also stuff that is like very specific to freight and not necessarily the exact same terminology that you would use in like everyday conversation in Spanish. And so that's where we wanted to use somebody to translate it initially that like understood freight. We also have a bunch of customers that use it in Spanish, and they have no issue giving us feedback if something's wrong. So they'll just like send us a screenshot and message us and say, hey, this translation is off, you should fix this. They love doing that and helping with that stuff. So yeah. But eventually there's some other stuff that we're going to build that's going to help brokers and carriers better connect. And I think that'll be where you would want some more real-time, like AI enabled translation.
What, so talk about the product, like in its origins. Like when did you decide this is what you wanted to do? Go the load board marketplace route? Like, talk us through that.
Well, so there was a point where I was building Forager towards like the end, where I had a conversation with my dad actually and said, we're struggling with the business and we're going through this M&A process, but like, I think our tech is good, and I just don't necessarily want to keep running a freight brokerage. And he said, well, you have an identity crisis. You can either be a freight brokerage or a tech company, but you can't be both. And so at that point, I thought like it'd be great if I could just split off the brokerage and take our technology and make that something that connects shippers and carriers. And that's kind of, a load board essentially. And I obviously learned, from my time at Forager, and ultimately we got acquired obviously as a full company. We didn't split it, but I learned between my time at Forager and at Arrive that trying to just connect shippers and carriers is like not a very productive path to take to try to help improve the industry. And I think freight brokers are going to be around for a very long time and are here to stay. And so I realized it made more sense to focus on supporting the companies that are servicing the shippers rather than trying to directly support shippers. And so I understand freight brokerage exceptionally well. I've done it for a long time. I did it for 17 years. And so I figured it made a lot more sense to build tech for them. And so there was that was kind of a moment. And then there was another moment, which I talked about on my brother's podcast too, which was that this guy Duke at Arrive had asked me what I would do differently if I could do Forager all over again. And I said, well, I wouldn't have built a freight brokerage. And that was the point where it kind of dawned on me that I should build something for brokers instead of building, the tech version of a freight brokerage.
Matt, real quick, you said that you talked with your dad about this, and he said there was an identity crisis. Now, the one question I've always had is that one of the things when anybody really mentions something about what differentiated Coyote was the fact that they internally built technology, but they didn't sell it. It didn't seem like, from my understanding, right? And that obviously gave them a huge advantage with Bazooka. So when you were maybe when you talk with your dad, like how does that come up in the conversation?
Hey there, amazing listeners. If you're enjoying what you're hearing on our podcast, we need your support. It will only take a moment, but it would mean the world to us. Please make sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share with one of your friends that would enjoy our content. Your engagement helps us reach more people and bring more awesome episodes to you. Thanks a million, and thanks for being part of the podcast community.
Well, I don't that is something that I brought up. I will say that and I don't think this is a secret by any means, but Coyote originally was started as a software company to sell a TMS to brokers and started building it that way. And so like they started building that as a TMS, but they also brought in customers. And the big difference, this is like if you could see the graphs that we had as a business at some point with Forager, like the margins were like up and down like crazy. Like we were negative 8% at some point, like thinking I could just like grow through everything and grow just like Convoy was growing. And we went back up to positive at some point, but like it was just all over the place. And the difference with Coyote was like there was a focus on profitability on day one. And so like they could afford to actually build the technology and the business at the same time and scale it and like had the right backing from Warburg Pincus to be able to like fund it. And so he and I did not get into the depths of that. He just said like, we had the right financial business model and the backers to be able to do that. And like, we did not. I was admittedly, in hindsight, was not focusing on building a profitable freight brokerage. My vision was to build something that would, eliminate the need to be a freight brokerage. And so I wasn't focusing on being a profitable brokerage. In hindsight, like if I were to do the exact same thing all over again, yeah, I would have brought somebody on that knew how to run a profitable freight brokerage and let them run the day-to-day of the brokerage. But I'm never doing that again. I like what we're doing now. It's all subscription, revenue. Customers pay us a monthly subscription. It's really nice.
So, man, I'm curious, since like building a marketplace is like super difficult, a lot of companies try it, especially in our space. Kind of wondering like what's your approach to that, and like how do you see it scaling and being successful? And like, have you seen some of those difficulties already, like being able to like scale it, or just give us like, I guess, more insights on that part of the business?
So two-sided marketplaces are definitely difficult. We spend a lot of time looking at companies like Airbnb and Uber, not Uber Freight as much as like the actual Uber side, and thinking about how they got, riders and drivers to engage. There's always two sides that you're thinking about. And even if one side's paying, so like brokers pay us, it's free for carriers. But we treat carriers the same way that we would treat brokers, and we'll answer any questions they've got. We'll take their feedback seriously. So we have to invest in both sides of it. And you have to kind of, there's this obvious, this saying when you're building a startup is, you're building a plane while you're flying it and you're trying to fix everything at the same time. And so like, on one day we're focusing on trying to get more brokers. On the other day, we're trying to focus on getting more carriers to bid, trying to get more engagement. So you're constantly trying to like improve both sides, and you just have to have a good pulse on both sides and be able to measure it and know that, if one side's not engaging as well as the other, then you have to push on that side or invest in that side more at the time than the other. We have people on both sides now that are doing those things. But
to that point though, so the old chicken and egg problem. What has been the more difficult side for you to acquire?
Acquiring it has not been an issue. It's getting engagement improved.
Yeah.
So like we can, I'm lucky to know a lot of people in the brokerage space, and a lot of people have worked at Coyote and have gone to work at other brokerages and lead other brokerages or are leaders at other brokerages. So like being able to like tap into that Rolodex right out of the gate was how we were able to jumpstart the demand side. The supply side, I've been to Laredo so many times that I know a lot of the people down there. And so started with the relationships that way. There's also a big WhatsApp group with a bunch of the owners of a lot of different trucking companies that I happen to be in.
WhatsApp is huge in South America, and it just like it shows up in so many different aspects, but that's crazy.
Yep. And Latin America and Mexico and everything. Like it's really big because I guess initially people were getting charged per text message, and so it was cheaper to just do it through WhatsApp than texting people, and so I guess that's why they're doing it that way. But yeah, I get distracted by all those messages. What was the last part of the question?
Sorry.
Matt, you tried this on hard mode too, from what I understand, because I saw a post you said that carriers are invite only, and from a marketplace perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like like Uber obviously was had a free flow sign up. There was no quote unquote friction, you can say, right? But I totally not only understand but also kind of admire the way that you're going about doing that, because it's a great way, a good preventative measure, against actual fraud taking place on the platform.
Yep.
I remember when Google had invite only email or like Gmail, and like everyone wanted it. Yeah. It was like you wanted to get that invite link. So
yeah, or Facebook, when Facebook rolled out, and it was, I remember I was like a junior in high school, and so everybody that was a senior, that got their college email, they were able to get access to Facebook, and I was like, I can't wait till I'm a senior and I go to a real college. But yeah, the carrier side, it's been very much about relationships. We've got people based at the border. Everybody says relationships are everything in this industry, and like I think technology is going to improve how people have their relationships or manage them, but like it's still rooted in relationships. And if a carrier reaches out that wants to join and we don't know them, then we're going to ask for 3 references, and they all need to be brokers. We're not looking to talk to any shippers. Like we want to hear from actual brokers that they've worked with these carriers, ideally on cross-border freight. Or if they come from another trucking company that can vouch for them, we'll consider that too if we've got the right relationship. So at the end of the day, the broker still vets the carrier on their side after they match. But it's been a much better experience for people in terms of, interacting in the marketplace so far.
Matt, how do most loads get booked nowadays? Cross-border loads? Is it like DAT, or like is there another load board that's your competitor? Like curious, like how does that like right now?
People send everybody WhatsApp messages and go, hey, who can take this load? There's, it's messages individually, it's emails. There's a lot of dedicated carriers running the same freight over and over again. They post on LinkedIn a lot. When we were raising money initially, the deck included a bunch of screenshots from LinkedIn and WhatsApp explaining what people do now. But we're seeing, we've seen more and more freight getting posted in our platform on a daily basis. And like the people are posting spot freight and dedicated freight. So people are posting a spot load, but they can also post lanes that they've been bidding on that they haven't been able to convert yet. And we've seen people convert, new business that way too.
Have you noticed? Go ahead, Reed.
My turn. What? So you said screenshots of what people were doing before. What was the craziest way somebody was covering cross-border freight that you saw?
I mean, there's nothing like crazy. They were just, there's LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, people are doing it on all the social media. There's some pretty big TikTok influencers, I guess, that post about freight. No, I don't have a TikTok. I mean, I have TikTok, but I don't post on TikTok. But yeah, it's LinkedIn. People post so much, like it's like a long message of where they've got trucks for Mexico or a lane that they're trying to cover that, now they can cover in 30 seconds using Cargado. So it's cool to see that transition. I've seen way less posting on LinkedIn about it.
Yeah. And that was actually going to be my follow-up question, which was, how have you seen the pull away from these, existing methods people are used to using, like particularly WhatsApp, right? Because it's very easy to just open up WhatsApp, type in your parameters, right? Post it out, and it just goes into a giant group. Have you seen that pull away from WhatsApp?
So I've seen less people posting in that WhatsApp group that I'm in that's got a bunch of different carriers that are all going back and forth. But what has not gone away yet that we're working on solving is the repetitive freight. So like people can source dedicated capacity through Cargado, but like they're not, they every day they go, hey, Reed, can you take another one of these loads? Hey, can you do another one from Monterey to Chattanooga? Can you do another one today? We're working on some tools to help automate that outreach and that workflow and maintaining those rates and all that stuff that'll kind of attach to the load board concept, and that'll help brokers, do more of that work without having to use WhatsApp. So we do. I posted this on Twitter once that I wanted to kill WhatsApp or put it out of business, but like I do want to get people out of WhatsApp as much as possible with our software.
What is there? And this might be a
Russ is saying, sorry, Christian, real quick, because Russ said you're forgetting Viber. Viber is more like Eastern European stuff. So I would assume that in Mexico they don't use it as much. I used to use it when I lived in Ukraine, but I haven't. It's like WhatsApp, but it's just like a different platform.
It's a different platform.
It doesn't seem like.
Oh, I've never heard somebody using it for Mexico.
Yeah, I think for us that's more like in Eastern Europe.
Matt, do you see any point where you can post a load in WhatsApp in one of these groups and it just automatically gets reposted through some automation on Cargado? Like, because getting people off a platform that they're already used to is obviously insanely difficult, right? So maybe there's a trend, like a transition,
We just send it to them on WhatsApp.
ePay Manager, powered by OTR Solutions, is a back office automation and carrier payments platform that revolutionizes brokerage back offices with their proactive invoicing workflow, a centralized portal that gets you out of your email. Learn more about ePay by visiting epaymanager.com or text ePayFC to 80483 to see what they can do for your brokerage.
So like we'll send, I don't know if,
yeah.
Like we'll send notifications on WhatsApp, and carriers love that. Cool. They can get notified on WhatsApp. The brokers can get notified on WhatsApp when they get a bid and all that stuff. So like we are sending stuff to WhatsApp in the meantime. And there will be ways, like this is a good example of applying AI to this stuff, is like somebody being able to take a screenshot of their TMS or being able to take details from a posting and just put that into our system, whether it's to create a posting and generate a new post for coverage, or if you're a carrier and you want to be able to put in, a list of trucks all at the same time and be able to just dump those into our system and then find all the freight, will enable carriers to do kind of both of those things and brokers to be able to do that stuff. So that would be a good example of that.
So Matt, I'm kind of curious now. You raised a lot of money, and now you're also traveling a lot. You've been to a few conferences. Kind of curious, how does your
not have a private plane?
No. What does your day-to-day look like? You said you're tired right now. It's 8 a.m. in Chicago. You're tired. I'm guessing you're probably, working pretty late, or you probably had a happy hour or something like that. Kind of wondering, how does your day-to-day look like nowadays? And how has that changed over the last year since you've brought on more people?
Well, so I'm just groggy, I guess. I'm not tired. I was, but I also have a, soon to be 4-year-old that just is bouncing off the walls at 5 a.m. So we're in that moment as a business and for me as a founder to go from like what's called going from founder-led sales to having other salespeople join the team and be able to sell and close deals and all that stuff. And my job is to help make sure that we've got enough money and make sure that we've got the right customers and engage with the most, with all of our customers and continue to help build the business however I can. And so right now, a lot of my time is spent doing demos, or it's been speaking on panels recently, or doing podcasts right now. But it's, there's a lot of different things that I have to do, but ultimately we had one sales rep started almost 3 weeks ago, and she's already closed 3 deals this week.
Awesome.
And that's, it's a combination of her energy and ability to sell and having, brokered freight and having been a carrier rep for several years and having an understanding of how this tech works, like makes it really easy to be able to demo this for people. We've got another salesperson starting on Monday, and we've got another one starting a couple weeks after that. And so all of a sudden we'll have 3 salespeople and a customer success person. And so that starts to position it to where I can focus on like some of the more strategic side of things and, targeting some expansion opportunities with customers, but also working with Rylan on the product. And I don't code. So it's not like I'm going to start like helping code, but wherever I can be helpful, my job is to just be able to fill in the gaps. A lot.
Do you use Figma?
No. Well, like the company uses Figma, but I know how to like add comments.
Okay.
I know how to use Illustrator and Photoshop, but I'm not like doing any of that stuff anymore. I'm not designing anything.
Matt, who decided to have a dog? So, sorry. Go ahead, Matt. Finish that thought.
We have an awesome designer who did the brand new website and like our upcoming updated sales deck that we'll have soon. Like all that is and he did the design of the product. So like it's been nice that I don't have to do any of that. As far as the dog, that's my dog Meatball.
I'm sorry?
My dog Meatball is the dog in the logo.
Okay.
Meatball.
Okay. And who came up with the name?
I did. It's Spanish for loaded.
I like it. Good name.
And you've also been pretty active on socials, and you've got your newsletter that you've been sending out. Like, how has that all been part of the strategy?
Plus, Sahil Bloom invested in Matt. So I guess if you could, Matt, add a little bit about that into this answer.
Well, that was part of the answer. So I guess part one is that Craig Fuller told me right after I left Arrive, which was right around a year ago. He was like, you should start sharing your opinion more on the internet. It's a valid opinion. And so Craig pushed me to start doing that. And I started doing that on Twitter and then also on LinkedIn and started talking about companies. So I was doing that. And then when Sahil invested, he mentioned the fact that he would help me with like social media engagement and talking through that stuff. And so when Rylan and I talked through the idea of like having a consistent newsletter, the newsletter originally started because a bunch of people called me back in the beginning of this year and asked me what was happening with the Cartaporte and all that stuff. And like the new version of it. And I did a bunch of research and I wrote a bunch of notes up and I was going to send it out in an email to people. And I was like, maybe this should be part of a newsletter. And so that was like initially what sparked that. But then, alongside with like Sahil investing and coaching me on some of the engagement stuff and saying like, post as often as possible, do a lot of commenting, a lot of responding, which I'm not very good at continuing to comment on stuff. Reed is a master shit talker on the internet. But I just, there was a lot of that coaching that's helped. And then he also helps, in a few other ways too. So
now, do you watch Sahil's YouTube channel? And do you use like the morning routine that he has where it's like cold plunge at 4 a.m.?
Yeah. Have you started cold plunging, dude?
Yeah.
No. Admittedly, no, I've not. And I probably should. The two things that I watch on YouTube on a regular basis are 20 VC with Harry Stebbings. He interviews a lot of entrepreneurs and investors, and I think that's really interesting. And then the All In podcast with ideally when they've gotten really heavy on the politics, which is like not as enjoyable as like some of the tech stuff, but I find that show to be pretty interesting.
Did you go to the summit?
Yeah, Christian likes.
No, I did not.
There were some really good. I thought there were some really good episodes or people that they interviewed on that summit, which was great. So
the Elon Musk thing with like the SNL.
That was
really funny.
That was so funny.
Yeah, I watched a bunch of those.
Real quick, there's a question from Jake. I feel like maybe you could answer it, Matt. Will EV semis have opportunities with border crossing freight in the future?
It sounds like it's probably one of the better examples because of the ability to just be local and charge. Because the way that cross-border freight moves is there's 3 segments. So you've got the segment going from like somewhere in Mexico, like Guadalajara up to the border. So like Guadalajara to Nuevo Laredo. You have Nuevo Laredo to Laredo, and then you have Laredo going to the final destination in the U.S. And so the border crossing movement of just like Nuevo Laredo to Laredo, it's just back and forth. Now, it includes going through customs and like paperwork and all that stuff, but that's all getting done by the customs broker. So hypothetically, I guess there could be, electric vehicles moving trucks back and forth and then eventually autonomous. The only reason why you wouldn't see that is because there's a lot of B1 drivers that cross the loads across the border, and there's more and more B1 drivers that are becoming like part of cross-border freight. And so a B1 driver has to actually be able to cross the border. And so they have to do that border crossing. And I don't think a B1 driver is going to take an electric truck from Nuevo Laredo all the way to Atlanta or all the way to Charlotte or to Ohio, just given how many times they have to stop and charge and whatever the timing is on that stuff. But if it's just for the border crossing movements, that's one thing. And then the other option is the freight that's moving between Monterey and Nuevo Laredo. Because that's such a short run and it's consistent and it's a major highway, I imagine the infrastructure's there. But I don't know enough about electric vehicles.
Since you started the company, what's been some of the most unexpected learnings that you've come across around particularly how things operate in Mexico versus the US? Anything in particular, like what's different about maybe, I don't know, terminology or process? I mean, and we talked about the WhatsApp thing, for example, right? Like that's super different, but what else has been the most surprising to you?
I mean, there's not that much that's surprising about how the freight is operated or executed because we're building, like I was one of the people calling carriers for a long time going, can you take this freight? And so like, this is the technology that we're building to help people do that more efficiently. And so I feel very confident in like, understanding what the problem is and not really a whole lot of surprises there. I would say if I were to talk about like, the differences between now and last time, building Forager versus Cargado and what I've learned and what's different is like, this is not just like repeating Forager and it's not, the same culture. We have a very different team structure. We have a very different leadership team, very different skill sets, backgrounds, experiences. Having Rylan as a co-founder is very unique and he's got, we have very complementary skill sets. And so it's the adjustment is actually on just like making sure that we're building a culture intentionally when we're fully distributed from day one. And it hasn't really been an issue, but it's something that you have to be intentional about.
What are some like key elements of that culture? You'd say like crafting cultures. Some people interpret that very differently, but how do you interpret it?
We're going through, writing all of our values out. Like Rylan and I wrote a version of it like when we first got started, but we figured that it made sense to actually have the team be part of creating those. And so we're working on that as a group. I would say that there's also, let me think, how often you get together with the team is really important. And early on, one of our earliest investor, Ty Finley from Iron Spring, he encouraged us to meet as a team quarterly and get everybody together. And so First time we did that was in Laredo. Then we did it in Monterey, and we've done it in Seattle and Chicago. We're going to move from quarterly to biannual just because the team's getting bigger and it gets more expensive. But there's also, several people in Seattle that can get together. We've got an office in Chicago now with 5 people and or about to be 6 or 7. And so we're about to be out of room in the current office space that we've got. And so getting, groups of people together more often is important, but like ultimately, if you're building a team distributed, getting the team together on a regular basis is critical.
Matt, curious how the freight market is right now in Mexico.
We don't have enough data yet to be able to like point to a graph, but go ahead.
I did want to say that like Arrive just came out with their freight market update yesterday, or this week, and it said that like rates are dropping in Mexico. And so
I read that.
Like, yeah, just wondering if that's because like there's less freight or there's more capacity than there was before. Do you have any insights on that? And also, if you don't, maybe like I would be curious to hear more about the cargo theft that's going on in Mexico and hear your thoughts if you have any.
So here's what I've heard generally speaking when I talk to carriers, and like we don't have enough. It's too early to have like a graph, that we would put out that'd be like the market turning. We'll have the data to be able to tell those stories, but like it just needs to get like a little bit more scale first. And we need to hire a data person to actually help like organize that stuff. But the intel that I get from carriers is like a couple things. One is, I always say like, how do you feel that the market is going? And they say, the rates kind of suck, and the market's like slow, and that means rates are going down to the point about Arrive. And then the second thing I say is, well, then, we've got all this freight in Cargado that you can bid on. Like, why aren't you bidding on more of this freight? There's something posted out of Mexico City. You should submit some bids. Oh, well, our trucks are full.
We've partnered with Ascend TMS, the world's most popular and top-rated transportation management system. You could use our referral code RA-FreightCaviar ! To receive 3 months of Ascend TMS for free. You can click the link below to learn more.
All right, so your trucks are full, but the rates aren't good. So why are you taking freight if the rates aren't good? So there's a weird balance between like the fact that carriers want the consistent volume, and because cross-border freight has so much more consistency to it, carriers will hold that volume and keep moving it so they don't lose the volume and lose the business, but they're not necessarily happy with the rates. And so there is a need for more volume to start, driving rates to go up. And I think, everybody talks about nearshoring exploding. I say everybody, I'm the guy posting about it all the time, but like that's starting, like they're building these plants. They're not built yet. They're not shipping tons of truckloads of freight yet. So that'll come, but like it's not immediate. And so the next question I ask these carriers is, are you going to buy more trucks if your trucks are full? Oh no, the market's not good. So it's like there's, but I'm hearing about like I'm seeing all these brokers starting to post freight, and it's new freight and it's new opportunities and it's different. So like there is a lot of opportunity out of Mexico. It's just a matter of like finding the right freight and the right carriers and matching all that stuff up the right way.
Yeah, and right now it's somewhat difficult to find freight, because like there isn't like that load board rule. That's why Cargado is there to like fix that. So like I'm curious, like, do you think it's because carriers are like they're afraid of saying no to the volume, even though it pays poorly, because they're afraid to like find something on the market because it's just difficult to find. Although the volume's there, it's difficult to find right now.
Well, I think it's like it's like the defeatist attitude that's like, oh, well, it's raining today, so it's going to suck. And it's like, like just going, oh, well, the rates suck, so why would I look for freight? Like, why don't you like look for the freight and see if the rates are good? You don't actually know that they're not good yet. And so that's what I think carriers kind of need to adjust a little bit is consider it. And not every carrier is acting like this, right? Like there are carriers that have told me that they're buying more trucks. There's some big trucking companies that are adding more. We just saw the news about DSV buying DB Schenker. DB Schenker owns USA Truck, which is a huge carrier. So like there's investment there, but like it's it's a slow market. Just, everything coming from Mexico is feeding the United States. So if it's slow in the U.S., it's going to be slow in Mexico too.
Matt, I don't know this, so that's why I'm kind of asking, but the brokers that you guys have as customers, are they actually US based companies, Mexico based companies, and then the carriers are in the US, or carriers or are both parties on both sides of the border?
The brokers are in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. Most of them are in the U.S., but there's a handful in Canada, and there's a few in Mexico. We're limiting who we're letting in from Mexico because there's actually nothing that like governs brokers in Mexico. So it's even less than carriers. Like carriers, there's at least like the SCIT, and you've got like, which is kind of their version of the DOT, but like there's not like some safer sys website that you can just go search. And with brokers, there's no what's it called? There's no they don't have to put down a deposit like a bond. So there's no $75,000 bond that you can file against. And so I'm hesitant to just like make it a free for all for any broker in Mexico to join. We have to know who they are. And so like there are some very, very large logistics companies in Mexico that are using Cargado, but like in the US, there's small brokers, there's medium and large brokers. So it's a range. In Canada, it's some of the largest Canadian brokers like FLS and Traffics, but also some smaller ones that you wouldn't have heard of. Nice. Carriers, it's almost entirely U.S. and Canadian carriers that service Mexico. There are a handful of Mexican trucking companies. They're the biggest ones because we don't want to onboard those Mexican carriers yet until we can properly have more information about them besides what's available today, which is maybe.
So how does this work for the carriers that are in the U.S. or say in Canada, right? Like, are they going into Mexico empty, or is there enough freight to move them actually into Mexico so that they get,
there's freight going down there, but it's not, it's definitely, there's more northbound than southbound. So like the southbound freight goes down in one of their trailers, but the trucks don't go. So the U.S. carrier's trailer goes into Mexico, it gets crossed with a transfer carrier, and then it gets pulled in Mexico with a Mexican partner carrier.
So the assets shared between two carriers.
Yes, trailer interchange agreement.
And is there anything special for trailer interchange agreements when it comes to cross-border freight? Is there like, obviously because it's across two countries?
It's across two countries, but like, so I was just on a panel at the McLeod User Conference, and this guy Jerry Maldonado from Warren Transport was on the panel with me, and he actually answered this perfectly. And what he talked about was, he gives his trailers to partner carriers in Mexico, and they have an agreement that says, if you're going to haul these loads for me, you're going to take my loaded trailers down to these markets in Mexico, and then you're going to pick up new freight from my customers in Mexico that you're going to bring back to the border, and I'm going to pay you for that. And so they are like, Warren is the lifeblood of that carrier, or part of the lifeblood of that carrier, as a customer. And so if you bring me back my trailer and the tires are wrong, I'm going to deduct that from your payment. And we have a level of trust here that you're going to bring me back the trailer the right way because I'm your customer. And if I keep getting trailers coming back the wrong way, I'll switch carriers. And because there's lots of carriers that you can partner with. So they partner, and it works well because they're protecting each other's business. And that's why their freight's not getting stolen, because they're protecting their freight. And it's why their trailers are coming back with the same lights and the same tires and the same hinges. So because Jerry's based in Laredo and he's got relationships with these carriers, he's not, Warren is based in Iowa. And so it's not like they're not managing that from Iowa. They're managing that through Jerry in Laredo. And he manages those relationships. And again, it goes back to relationships or everything. So that trailer interchange agreement is like there to cover all of that stuff. But the reality is it's like a network, it's an infrastructure, there's a relationship there. It's not just like, hey, somebody go grab my trailer and bring it down there. Like they have that with several different carriers. Depending on who you can go to a Mexican trucking company's website. A lot of the time they'll have it on their website about, who they partner with in the US. So it varies. But
how does it work with insurance? If something happens with that trailer on the Mexican border side, and Mexican carriers taking it? Like,
so the Mexican carrier is liable for the trailer, so they have to have insurance for the asset. That's very different than the freight. So they are definitely insuring the trailer. And again, same deal. That's your customer. Like if if you lose the trailer and you don't give them a new trailer, they're going to deduct it, or they're going to get mad and they're going to stop paying you and they're going to start using you. And so imagine how much revenue you lose by not replacing that trailer. And so that's one side. On the freight side, there's, by law, cargo insurance is not required in Mexico, and so the shipper is liable for the freight while it's in Mexico, or the beneficial cargo owner. And so
wow.
it's something like 10 cents per pound or something like that, or that the carrier or the broker can be liable for. So it ends up being like a few $1,000s for a truckload that you'd owe. And so there's two ways. Either, as a broker, you're asking the shipper to make sure that they're covering the freight themselves and that they cover it under their own policy, or they self-insure it. The other is that they get set up with something like borderless coverage from Reliance Partners, and they get Mexico insurance coverage for the freight while it's in Mexico. And we'll eventually embed something like that in the product, but I tell people just go to Mark Vickers and sign up with him to get that insurance. It's cool because like you can get it for a spot shipment. So like if a customer wants to go to Mexico, you can get it. Or if you've got a customer that's shipping truckloads of tequila every day from Guadalajara up to the border, and you want it for that account, you can get it for that lane or that account, and it kind of varies from there.
Matt, what's going on with the cargo theft situation in Mexico? Like, it's kind of wild out there, isn't it?
I don't hear about it nearly as often as people make it sound like it's a big issue. Okay. There's certain types of freight that are going to get stolen or that are high theft or high risk. But I've said this, I've written this, but like I hear more about theft through, freight on load boards and double brokering through load boards than I hear about freight getting stolen in Mexico. But the reality is there are definitely some hotspots in Mexico. Reliance Partners actually publishes a whole thing about this that I would recommend finding and covering. But areas like Puebla are definitely a little bit more risky. Areas in parts of the Bajío or in southwestern Mexico can be a little bit riskier. But like automotive parts coming from Monterrey going up to the border are not at risk. What is anybody going to do with automotive parts? We're not talking about aftermarket parts that you're going to go sell. We're talking about like tier 1 parts that are going into like a car that's being manufactured at a plant in like Tennessee or Kentucky. And so like nobody's stealing those parts because they can't do anything with it. They will steal tequila. They will steal TVs and appliances because you can sell that stuff. Drinks, beverages, like those are things that you can definitely steal. And I've had a couple beverage loads stolen, but like it's usually the really high value stuff that's more at risk that people are actually targeting. Anything moving consistently, you don't hear about that happening a whole lot.
Okay. So you don't know of any Cargado load that's been stolen yet?
No. Not that I've heard.
Okay.
I mean, you guys, to your point about there not being enough data to really like make a graph or whatever you said, like you guys are going to be at a very interesting position because you're going to have like all this data long term. And so you're going to be, there's probably a whole data side of the business that's going to be there that doesn't currently exist because nobody really has the infrastructure to collect it in real time, and you will. So I guess talk through like how you see that going.
There's a lot. I think the data goes into a couple different buckets. I think there's understanding, market data, like where there's available capacity and where there's, a lot of interested capacity and where there's not, and how much it costs to move freight. But then I think there's also like,
today's podcast is also brought to you by TextLocate. TextLocate makes it easy for brokers to communicate directly with drivers via SMS-based text messaging, no app to download, without having to use personal communication devices. Go to textlocate.com to learn more.
What's going on with the load and where is it and all that stuff that I think people need help with. And so I think there's different layers to it. And if we think about like, I don't know if you guys know what rippling is or how it works, but it's not just like an HRIS, and it's not just an employee management, like employee record system. It's like everything that kind of wraps around the employee. And so you can have it propagate really easily in different places through rippling. And so we see the concept of like all the different components of cross-border freight being something that we want to be able to support. And so that's everything from coverage to carrier, engagement to managing the actual capacity on the freight and picking the right carriers and negotiating and actually executing and tracking and everything else that kind of goes along with a load moving across the border. So there are a lot of different data points. There's a lot of different parties involved, different languages, different, SKUs of different commodities and different customs process. So we're not going to build something for every single little piece, but like either building it or stitching it together and pulling in other companies and integrating with them would be where we see the excitement.
Matt, curious. I have a lot of these questions that are kind of like, I guess, all over the place, but you started doing cross-border freight at Coyote, and I'm curious about like, what was cross-border freight like, first of all, at Coyote? Like, what percentage of revenue was it at? Like when you started and maybe when you like left Coyote, and just kind of curious, like, what were you typically shipping? You said that you booked a lot of carriers like WhatsApp and stuff. Like, how did you find these carriers? Like, how was that whole process like when you started, and what year was that?
It was 2014. I don't know. The revenue would have been basically nothing because like we weren't moving Mexico freight. We had like one or two customers who like managed transportation that had cross-border business, but it was not like wasn't like actively being brokered. The first thing that I ever looked at was composites, like for an industrial manufacturer. For like housing materials. Something with construction. I don't know enough about it. But I remember, helping with the RFP for that. Well, sorry, the very first loads I moved were toothpaste.
Okay, Colgate.
Yeah. But then the very first thing that I actually helped price was the composites for a manufacturer in the U.S. I was also, oh God, now that I think about this, I was tasked with finding capacity for a very popular tequila brand.
Which one?
And it had to be secured with security. Well, I'll give you clues. In prison now.
El Chapo.
Oh shit! Okay. There we go.
Diddy's tequila.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know. That just connected.
So you know P. Diddy? No, I'm kidding.
No. So yeah, we were moving tequila. Like we were trying to figure out how to move tequila, and I had to find security escorts. I had no idea how to figure out how to get security escorts. I was calling carriers.
In Mexico, you had to get a security escort to like drive in front and behind the trailer and truck. Is this like a typical thing to do in Mexico for high value freight?
Yeah, especially tequila. You can even do that in Cargado. Like you can go in and say that it needs a security escort.
And you hook it up, Matt, with the
we don't set it up.
Oh, you just put it. Okay, but
silver security. That's what you can call it.
And like,
silver
so what security look like?
Yeah, what does this look like?
I think it's
machine guns,
cards in the front, cards in the back. I don't know whether they're armed or not. Because once you're armed, you're getting in like shootouts over a truckload of freight, and then like people are dying. So I think the goal is to just intimidate them and scare them off.
Semi-secure.
Yeah, they run like caravans and stuff like that. So they'll have like two trucks in a row. You hear about this in the U.S. also, where you're told like, there's I forgot which company it is, but there's like a distribution center in like the DFW area where there's a lot of booze that comes out of there, and you have to drive for 200 miles before you can stop. So like, same thing with Mexico. I think like one is, there's ways to prevent theft, and then there's ways to like deal with it, and like preventing it is, following the instructions of the shipper, because they usually have a plan to prevent it. And like, you only drive during the day, you don't drive at night. You can use things like Tive and put one of those devices in the trailer and track it. But the reality is, like, if they steal the trailer, are you going to go get it back from them?
In Mexico.
Like, Yeah, like, are you going to go down there, or is it a dispatcher, or is like, are you sending like
Matt's gonna go.
trucking company to go get it? And like, how are they getting it back? Are they going and fighting with like whoever it is that took it? And so I like Troy Riley he's the president of Redwood, Mexico. I remember he spoke at a conference in Chicago that I was at, where he goes, it's, everybody always wants to know where the freight got stolen, but once you know where the freight got stolen, there's nothing you can do about it. You just know that it got stolen right there. But the load's gone when it gets stolen, and you might recover the truck and the trailer, but the trailer's going to be empty, and so there's not much you can do to recover it. You can just try to prevent it, and make sure you insure it if you need to.
Okay, so that was the first load of toothpaste, Colgate, and then then you got the P. Diddy's tequila being shipped
and
with
the
secure
composite.
transit.
Yeah. Deposits.
Okay. Continue that story.
Automotive. All right. So do you want to keep talking about that one? So
just continue the overall answer that story, because
I mean, it was to answer part of your question. I don't know what the revenue was as far as like a percentage of Coyote, because like the Mexico business of most freight brokerages is not very big. You look at some of the really big guys that have like a significant presence. Like, I don't know what their percentage is, but I imagine companies like Ryder and Uber Freight and that owns Transplace, and like all that stuff. Like, imagine they've got significant portions that are related to Mexico, but at Coyote it was not like a substantial part. It just became a bigger part, and it was a much higher margin. So like margin per load on Mexico freight that I've seen can be around $600. Domestic freight's like $150 to $200. So that's where people would get excited about, was going after the freight that would help them make a lot of money. So it was automotive, it was food and bev and CPG. All your big CPG providers, like, look at every toothpaste tube out there, and it's made in Mexico. And walk through the grocery store, look at a lot of the stuff in the produce aisle, and it's made in Mexico. So like pharmaceutical, like a lot of healthcare stuff, a lot of medication comes from Mexico now. There's Mattel is like notorious for having moved a lot to Mexico. So there's a lot of different commodities, but we were moving, at Coyote we had every type of customer. So it was a wide range.
Okay. And that was growing. You said 2014 was when it began, and then it just drastically
2014 through 2017, I was doing that. We opened up an office in Guadalajara at some point around that same time. And then I spent a year helping grow Canada, and then left in 2018 and started Forager.
Very cool.
Spent a lot of UPS too while I was at Coyote.
What's your you worked with UPS a lot? I imagine they have
someone sleeping next to you, Reed?
No.
You're like talking as if someone's like sleeping, like you're like quietly like talking.
Sorry guys, I gotta keep it down. No, what I was gonna ask was what's your favorite town in Mexico? Where do you like going down there?
Cabo. When it comes to business though, it would be Monterrey.
When are you guys gonna have a Cabo office?
Anytime I go down there, it's Cabo office.
Work from Cabo.
Yeah, WFC.
I'll accept that answer. I like Cabo too. Mexico's cool though. I feel like people really like sleep on Mexico. Like, Mexico is an awesome spot.
I feel like everyone talks about Mexico nowadays.
There's a couple people from my team that are in Mexico City right now, that have been down there most of the week, meeting with people at a conference. So yeah, I mean, I want to eventually have an office in Monterrey. I'd love to have engineers in Monterrey, have salespeople, success. We will definitely support brokers and carriers in Mexico and within Mexico and all that stuff eventually. And we want to make sure that we do that from Mexico, not from Chicago. So we're definitely building our sales and success presence right now in Chicago, but we'll do the same thing in Monterrey.
Yeah, that's
You're
cool.
remote though, right? You don't have an office.
We have an office, but we're remote or distributed, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
But sales and success have to come into the office a few times a week, because we want that to be in office. But engineering is fully distributed. We got people all over the U.S. We would love to have engineers in Mexico. We just haven't had anybody apply yet.
You're in luck because we have a large audience of Mexican software engineers. So
Yeah,
you
just gotta post
be
on
flooded.
freightjobs.co
Yeah.
and you'll get a lot of applicants.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're good to go. You're going to be great after
Yeah.
this. Solid.
I'll tell the team to post it there too.
There you go.
Good deal. Nice. Matt, we have a minute before we go. Anything you want to say before we finish it off? Go. Nothing.
No, just sign up for Cargado. It's the easiest way to get started on cross-border freight.
It's invite only though, so you got to first be invited.
Yes, you got to fill out the form on our website if you want access.
Yo, can you invite us?
Who's us? You guys?
I don't know.
All of us?
Yeah.
All three of us?
You guys were invited to a happy hour that you didn't show up to.
Oh, damn. Shit.
Okay,
sorry
well,
about that. That was actually yeah.
For those in
We haven't
Chicago,
spoken
you
since-
come to the happy hour on Tuesday night.
October 1st.
Highway. Well, October 1st with Highway, AVRL, Lead Edge, and Lead Coverage.
Damn, we might have to redeem ourselves and come to Matt's happy hour.
Yeah, you do.
Paul, fly in from Poland, bro. Come on.
Yeah, for sure. I'll be at F3 though, Matt. If you be at F3, we'll see you there.
It's my birthday, right?
Yeah, PJ. I'll take the Cargado PJ, Matt. Just send it over here.
Yeah, send it, dude.
The CJ.
Let's just go to Cabo. That sounds better than Chicago. It's probably not as gloomy in Cabo right now.
We'll do a FreightCaviar Cabo Summit.
That
sounds
pretty
good.
dope.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
all right.
Sounds really
All
good.
right. Well,
Yeah.
that's a good takeaway. It's a good place to end it. Cabo Summit coming soon.
Matt, thanks so much, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Matt. I'll see you here soon.
See you guys later.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Later, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Daily Freight Caviar Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, or if you didn't, leave a review. Let me know what you think. I appreciate any feedback. If you'd like to have more Freight Caviar content, go to freightcaviar.com and subscribe to my email newsletter.